Welcome back to the KiwiSaver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger right here in Aotearoa. Have you ever wondered about other people and their money? Well, I did. Via my blog, The KiwiSaver, I get the chance to meet so many people who manage their money in all sorts of ways. I learn a lot from each of them, and I knew that you would too. Now, everyone is different. Every journey with money is different. But what remains the same is that just everyday people generously explain how they handle their money in New Zealand to me. Now, just so you know what you are in for, you won't hear from them directly. Kiwis are coy about their money and they often prefer to remain anonymous. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to share their personal finance story. So I interview them and then I retell their experiences in my voice in this podcast. And here is a fun fact. I'm not one to dig into listener statistics too much, but Johnny let me know the other day that we are well up over 1 million plays for the KiwiSaver podcast now, which is kind of cool. Thank you so much to every single one of you who gave up your precious time to listen, and an especially huge ngā mihi nui or warm thank you to those who have shared their money journey. Righto, on with it. Now this episode is a revisit. I first interviewed Neil, which is not his real name, back in July of 2022. The episode was number 69 and it was called A Financially Complicated Breakup. It was a very apt title. Now, just to jog your memory, Neil was aged about 49 when we last spoke, and he'd moved to the North Island of New Zealand from the UK in about 2005. Today, he's about 52 and has just hit the 20-year mark in New Zealand. He works in IT and has more or less stayed in the same industry in a variety of roles the entire time he's been here. He had kept the house he owned in England, which he rented out, just in case he wanted to return there. In around 2006, he started to learn about money, learning from the likes of the Motley Fool, Mr. Money Mustache, and Dave Ramsey. And when KiwiSaver started in 2007, he joined up. And when we spoke for the first episode, he had a balance of about $200,000 and his KiwiSaver was with Superlife. He had started a long-term relationship, and when it ended, the house and assets that they had bought together were evenly divided up, and over the years he began to invest more and more in a range of ETF funds, some of which were invested from New Zealand and the others from the UK. He also received a sizable inheritance of about $300,000 many years ago, which he also invested. Now, another relationship began, and to his surprise and delight, he became a father. Because he entered the relationship with far greater wealth than his partner, he was in a good position to buy a home for the family to share. But he never created a relationship property agreement that detailed their unequal wealth, one that would protect both parties if the relationship were to end. Well, sadly, the relationship did end, and that is when a legal battle broke out over reaching a financial settlement. Now, to be blunt, he said that she wanted more money than he was willing to give, and it felt unfair that she could take what he had worked so hard to create. When we spoke, they remained quite some distance apart from each other, and both were speaking via their lawyers. Things were tense, with neither willing to budge. Now, I wanted to share this revisit today because being a woman, I naturally speak with a lot of other women, and I meet many women who are in the midst of a protracted fight with their ex over money and access to children. It can be a cruel period for all involved, as two people who claim to once love each other try to destroy, both emotionally and financially, the other one. Often there is a financial imbalance which is put under even more stress if she has children and has time off work to raise them. Doing that and working to earn income is incredibly difficult to manage for most of the women I meet. Often something has to give, and it's their career, their contributions to their retirement accounts, payments towards their student loans, and more. So with that in mind, it was enlightening for me to hear about the experience from a man's perspective. But also, in detailing Neil's journey today, I'm very aware that I'm only hearing one side of this experience. And I'm relieved to say that this separation finally had a happy ending. And while protecting the confidentiality of all involved, I wanted to try to share some of the details of how that happened. But before I really make a start, a big thank you from me to Pocketsmith for their ongoing support of the Happy Saver. Have you ever wanted to save for a big goal, like a holiday or an expensive purchase? Having the discipline to save for a goal reduces stress and allows for the fulfillment of meaningful experiences and desires without resorting to debt. Pocketsmith is ideal to help you save up for big-ticket items such as a holiday. You begin by creating the habit of regularly setting aside money, and Pocketsmith helps you track your progress towards your goal using customizable budgeting tools, cash flow forecasts, and saving trackers, enabling you to set and manage specific financial targets efficiently. I always have a number of different goals on the go, and Pocketsmith helps me keep track of them all. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. When the relationship ended, Neil stayed living in the house he had purchased and was paying the $400,000 mortgage that remained on it from his $110,000 gross income. It was a stretch to do so the 1,900 New Zealand dollars that he received in rental income each month from his flat in the UK came in handy, and he was able to use some of that to cover all his costs. Now, at this time, Neil shared that it felt very unfair that while he had bought the house himself for his family to live in and was servicing the entire mortgage, his ex-partner was asking for a financial settlement somewhere in the range of $200,000 to $300,000. This figure mostly represented the capital gains the home had had during their almost 3 years together. To him, it felt unfair to have to give up a large chunk of what he felt he had created, and when we spoke, he did say that he was hopeful that in hindsight, he will see that the things he worried about would work themselves out. They did, but a bit of water had to go under the bridge first. Now, after our last kōrero, things got stressful for Neil, and for his ex-partner too, I would imagine. He said he had a lot of sleepless nights worrying about his life and stewing over how unfair it felt to hand over money to someone he felt didn't deserve it. And I think it's fair to say that during this time, he didn't see the person he was negotiating with. He just saw numbers on a page and a win or lose scenario. He had a net worth of around $2.2 million and wanted to give up as little of that as possible. Again, you'll need to jump back to episode number 69 to hear more of how he came to grow his wealth. Now, when we last spoke, he continued to work, continued to pay 3% into his KiwiSaver, and he managed to have an emergency fund of $10,000, plus various sinking funds to save up and cover known future expenses, including paying his lawyers. He still had money invested in ETFs and index funds both in Aotearoa and in the UK, and the biggest question weighing on his mind was that he knew he would be paying out something, but he was really unsure where the money would come from. It seemed obvious and likely that he would need to sell some investments at some point. From speaking with Neil, I know that he was in a far stronger financial position than the mother of his child. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest here, I could see both sides. A woman who is fighting for what she deserves, having put her life on hold to have a child with someone while helping to care for and maintain the home that he owned. So, while his ex-partner might not have contributed a lot of money to a relationship, what price do you put on a career put on hold, care of a house, and caring for a tiny human who is completely dependent on its parents? They were not just arguing about money, they were arguing about custody too. Emotions were very high. So, how did it work out? Neil got back in touch with me for this update because he said that he and they have moved through the worst of it, and the expression that things have a habit of working themselves out is true in their situation. But it's been a long process and taken a lot of work and compromise from both of them. In the early stages, both of them went full bore with the legal approach, using lawyers and court sessions to assess the case and make a ruling. Courts are clogged with cases and progress was slow, and each of their private relationship information was aired in public as they each sought to work out the actual length of their relationship by sharing facts and dates that they each thought relevant. It sounded like a brutal process where each pointed out the inadequacies of the other. They each felt they had to give it everything they had to advocate for themselves. They went to and fro for a long time, changing lawyers and getting different legal advice along the way. They remained miles apart with their settlement, although it was eventually agreed that the duration of their relationship was under 3 years. Now, this is important in terms of the Property Relationships Act, which would mean they were not considered a de facto couple. However, because they had a child together, the courts would take that significant factor into consideration, even if their relationship was shorter in duration, and even if she brought less into the relationship financially. By 2024, mediation had dragged on, and although they inched closer towards an agreement, they were nowhere near settlement as they dug in for the long wait for a court date that was looking like being a year away. Both of them were preparing their arguments and defences for that time. Neil was very candid when he said that he was doing whatever he could to avoid paying her out. He just felt like he was giving up too much money. And I think it's fair to say that Neil spent a lot of time focused on the financial repercussions of the situation at the exclusion of all else. He said that part of the good work his lawyer did was getting him to slowly see the other party's perspective and get him to gradually come to the understanding that, in their experience, it was likely the courts would decide on a payout in the $200,000 to $250,000 range. And his lawyers didn't shy away from discussing their costs either, pointing out to Neil that by using lawyers in the way he and his ex-partner were, he would be spending $20,000 to $30,000 to prepare his argument for the courts. In addition to this, they prepared him for the fact, whether he liked it or not, he needed to get ready to hand over some money. While focused so intently on the money and the here and now, he was not seeing the situation in its entirety, nor thinking about the long-term viability of co-parenting with someone he was at war with. His lawyers also helped him see the non-financial part of the role his ex-partner played in their relationship, where she gave birth to their child and gave up work to give their child all the love and care they needed. That is a huge commitment, which comes with massive responsibility, which just can't be overlooked. When it came to co-parenting, Neil never wanted to shirk his responsibility as a parent, and he wanted to be fully involved as a dad. And while he didn't want to give her more money, he wanted more time with his child. She, on the other hand, was possibly thinking, if you can't even acknowledge the input of me having your child, how can you be a good parent to that child? So there were huge emotional and financial factors at play here, a huge tug of war. In 2024, Neil began speaking with a counsellor to help him get some perspective on the entire complex, emotion-filled situation. And I was relieved when he explained that his counsellor and his lawyer helped him reframe the entire situation and look beyond the numbers for the first time to the people he was fighting with, which really was not just his ex-partner, but his child too. He began to see that if he paid her out, she would be in a position to buy a home, and that would give his child a stable home instead of the instability that comes from renting a property when houses are sold out from under tenants, something the two of them had already been facing. His ex-partner had earned well prior to parenthood, but work was sometimes patchy, even more so with a child, and it dawned on him that by helping her, he was helping their child. He came to understand that they would either have to reach an agreement together, either with or without the help of lawyers, or courts would force it. Finally, Neil was coming around to the idea that reaching a custody agreement that gave them both the ability to parent, plus reaching a financial settlement which each could live with, was the correct thing to do. In 2024, Neil and his former partner both sat down in a room together, just the two of them, with no lawyers and with no distractions, and they each took out their laptops, and for the first time in a long time, they began to talk directly with each other. Over the course of many hours, they went from ripping each other to shreds to, for the first time in a long time, really listening to each other. By the end of that long and I would imagine emotionally exhausting meeting, they had reached an agreement that Neil would pay a settlement to his ex-partner of $225,000. During the course of this long and productive kōrero, where neither of them planned to leave until agreement was reached, he saw that she was not being vexatious. Instead, she was looking to be awarded what New Zealand law says is fair and reasonable, given what she had contributed, and not just in a financial way, to their relationship. Neil said he was also able to reflect on the amount of case studies he read throughout this entire awful process, where he didn't like reading about the behaviour of men during a divorce, where they try to hide money and just generally try to limit what their ex and their children get. When they reached an agreement during that long meeting, he was happy to have found some clarity, to see the woman sat in front of him and not just the numbers. To be out the other side gave them immense relief. When they reached an amicable agreement, he was taken aback by how things instantly changed in a way he was just not expecting. He said that once they shook hands on their agreement at the end of the meeting, it was like a switch had been flicked, as they went from being adversarial and in fight mode to prove their case and fight their corner, to letting all the arguments they had had about custody just melt away, saying, let's now move forward and be parents to our child and grown-ups who are open to discussing parenting and reasonable in how they hear each other's thoughts and suggestions. As he recounted these details, I was just so relieved to hear this. To dig into those details a little, given that money was a large component of the dispute, I was curious as to how the math played out during their long talk. Well, they started with the value of the house. It was purchased by Neil with a mortgage for $845,000, and they had a good estimate of what it would have been worth at the time their relationship ended. They valued it at approximately $1.25 million, so had a capital gain of about $405,000. They took the mortgage into account and split the remaining sum in half. They also discussed at length a full financial statement of each of their assets, including the value of the cars they both owned and the value of the furniture in the home, and any and all items that were considered assets. They also discussed any debt that either of them brought into the relationship and who should be responsible for that. There were many small modifiers that each conceded to the other, with each of them being as reasonable and fair as possible, so that they could leave the table on that day having reached an agreement. There was no winner in the settlement. Neither achieved the financial settlement they were originally pushing for, but that is negotiating for you. And eventually they settled on $225,000. Neil immediately advised his lawyer that they had agreed on a settlement, as did she, and his lawyer asked for all the relevant information on how they reached this figure. To protect both of them, their lawyer advised that these details were important should they ever try to take each other to court in the future. They agreed on a settlement date about 7 weeks in the future, which would give both of them time to seek any additional advice or information and give their lawyers time to do their work. And this also gave Neil some time to come up with $225,000 in cash. All up, he spent about $15,000 on legal advice. Now, as I mentioned, as soon as they shook hands, both of them felt an immediate sense of relief. And Neil also got to see the financial reality of this legal war on his ex-partner. Just like his legal fight had been expensive, so had hers, but she never had the financial strength behind her to pay cash as Neil had. The reality was that a decent chunk of her settlement would be paid to her lawyers too. They each spent a lot of money to ultimately reach a settlement that their legal team had told them was a likely outcome in the first place. To pay the $225,000 settlement, Neil looked at his portfolio of investments and sold stocks and shares that he had free and full access to. Some were here in Aotearoa and some were over in the UK. The UK banking system slowed things up a bit with a daily $10,000 transfer limit, but once he had pulled the money in the UK, over the course of about a month, he used the most cost-effective provider, Wise, to convert and bring about $150,000 to New Zealand. He collated it in his New Zealand bank account with the money from the sale of his New Zealand shares until he reached the full amount. Now, I was curious, as I'm sure you might be too, as to how he decided what to sell. Well, several years ago, he had purchased units in a US 500 Vanguard fund, but then he stopped contributions into that in favour of investing in a total world fund, which now had a larger balance. So he sold the entire US 500 fund, given he had been transitioning to a total world fund anyway. Through no skill on his part, he said, he sold at a time when the share market had a wee rise, so was able to take advantage of that. An additional expense for Neil was that he also has capital gains tax to pay in the UK on the shares he sold, and he is actually still working that through with a UK tax lawyer at the moment. He is estimating a tax bill of about $30,000, and he has been saving up some of the rental income from his UK flat in readiness to pay this hefty tax bill. He just wants it done so he can fully move on. You know how sometimes something quite traumatic happens in your life and it's awful at the time, but when you do manage to move through it and come out the other side, you can actually use that experience to live your life a bit differently? Well, this entire experience has really changed Neil's perspective on a lot of things. First up, and it's just a little thing, but we were speaking at a time when share markets are down, and those on TikTok are saying, invest when the market is down, shares are on sale. Well, old Neil might have actively taken advantage of that, as it seems like a no-brainer. But he now realises that life sometimes gets in the way. Theory meets life. And his income is being pulled towards other more pressing things right now. He's got responsibilities now, other than just managing himself, with plenty of money to spare to invest. Probably a more powerful lesson was that selling some shares and actually using the money at a time when he really needed to actually broke the seal and moved him towards the idea that he can use his stocks for other things. Money is a tool. There is little point to just endlessly accumulating it. You have to have more of an idea of what you could use it for. So when a member of his whānau said, what about selling off more stock to pay off your mortgage in New Zealand? He thought, you know what? I can actually afford to do that and still have £100,000 invested in the UK. Gone was the never ever sell a single investment Neil. Now, during the last couple of years since he split from his partner, he said he was thinking about and too focused on all the doom and gloom and what he perceived he didn't have. Selling investments down gave him a reality check. He realised he had options, good options. He decided that paying off his mortgage would let him live with peace. Peace had been sorely lacking in his life. This aha moment coincided with his mortgage coming up for renewal, his mortgage advisor advising him to refix for another 18 months, and his bank messaging him to say, hey, you'd better hurry up or your mortgage rate will change from fixed to a higher floating interest rate soon. So, in early 2025, he sold off more shares in the UK, creating another capital gains tax bill, and he paid off his remaining $330,000 mortgage on his New Zealand home, leaving him with about £100,000 invested. He said he learned a little from the first sell-off though, and he sold from funds that were invested more recently, lessening the capital gains tax due. His banker actually congratulated him on making this huge financial step to become mortgage-free, and Neil said that her kind words were nice to hear, and he felt immense pride to make his own decisions and do this on his own. It has taken a while for it to sink in just how much freedom he has given himself now. Despite his significant net worth, prior to paying off his mortgage, he had too much month left and not enough money, and it was stressful. He was struggling to pay his mortgage and all his other bills on one income. His after-tax monthly income of about $6,000 needed to be topped up using money from his UK rental property, but as soon as he paid off the mortgage, he had $2,700 a month that was no longer heading out the door as a mortgage payment, but was now sitting in his bank account, quickly building up. Since paying off the mortgage, he has stopped using the money from his UK rental, which he is now saving up to pay his UK tax bill, and is managing to live on about $3,000 a month. Now this gives him a 50% savings and investing rate. Now the other big changes, now that the mortgage is gone, is that he is less stressed about his job. He enjoys his job, but if it ends for any reason, he knows that the now $2,000 rental income from his UK flat would go a lot of the way to cover his expenses. So he could almost survive without working for a time. And having this freedom is such a relief, he said. Being mortgage-free opened his mind to speak to his employers about the next steps in his career. He is seeking a change in his work situation and would like to spend more time during the week working on his hobbies and being with his child, but is unsure what that might look like. His employers were really open to discussing flexible working hours, which would see him stay on the same pay rate of $115,000 a year, but give him more time to try a few mini experiments of his own at home to make a little bit of money on the side each month. Or he could use his time and skills to help friends, he thought. Now, I know the mathematicians amongst us might scoff at Neil selling a well-performing investment asset, creating a tax bill, and paying off mortgage debt. And having spoken to Neil a few times now, the Neil of 10 years ago might have scoffed at that too. Neil is a very logical person, you see, but sometimes life gets right up in the face of a person who tries to apply math logic to life, and life brings you a child you never expected to love as much as you do, and a spouse you never expected to leave. Removing mortgage stress from his life was the right decision for him. Math meets reality, and Neil's counsellor really helped him think about the merits of paying his mortgage off. Prior to all this kicking off, my bet is that he would not have been able to articulate why he owned a flat in a different country, why he had share market investments, etc. They always say that if you start to invest today, your future self will thank you for it. Well, current Neil is thanking past Neil for creating assets that would give him such a sense of calm and freedom today. And current Neil has learned a massive lesson in that you need to stop thinking so intently about your finances and start learning more about the people around you instead, and to learn to look at life and people from a different angle. So, what is his financial position today? He lost so many nights' sleep thinking he would never financially recover, and he was literally sacrificing his relationship with his child because when he was with them, he was sometimes not fully present as he worried about the impending court case. It all meant that he held on too tightly to his money, but looking back now, he sees it was a stupid way to think. With a net worth now somewhere around the $2.36 million mark, he has more than recovered from making a fair payment to his ex-partner. In reality, he gave up 10% of his net worth, and if he could go back in time, he would tell himself to shut up and give her what is fair from the get-go. He now owns a home worth about $1.1 million in New Zealand. His house in the UK is worth about 600,000 New Zealand dollars, and the rent creeps up slightly each time there is a change in tenancy every couple of years. At the time we spoke, it makes about 2,000 New Zealand dollars a month. He has about £100,000 in a total world fund in the UK. Now that he has sold all that he intends to sell, he has gone back to making contributions into this fund each month and just ignoring it otherwise. He has a pension in the UK from a previous employer with a balance of about £50,000. His KiwiSaver is still with Superlife, and he said it is his least diversified fund, with it split between New Zealand Top 50 and the Australian 20. But it had a good balance of about $300,000 in it the last time he looked. When we spoke almost 3 years ago, his balance was $200,000, showing he has both been making consistent contributions to it via his employer, himself, and the government contributions, but also enjoying the rising share market of the last couple of years. He still has an InvestNow investment account, which is where he sold some units to pay his settlement. The balance is approximately $60,000 spread across 2 ETFs, which are the US 500 and a total world fund. However, he has completely stopped buying into the US 500 and now just puts new deposits into the total world fund. He made this change before Trump was re-elected, and he did it because he felt that even though the US makes up something like 60% of a total world fund, holding other countries makes it even more diversified. He called it a gentle change of direction, and he has found it quite fascinating watching what is happening under a Trump presidency. A few other things of note are that he has begun an investment for his young child and tries to teach them little bits about money whenever he can. Plus, he also sold some shares in his own company stock. These shares were part of his compensation package from his employer. He chooses not to own individual stocks. It is a risk that is easy to avoid by just selling them. And he moved that money into a sinking fund bank account as he is mulling over changing his car sometime in the future. Plus, he keeps cash in his bank to pay for life's general expenses, plus that looming UK tax bill. He pays for half of his child's expenses, but, and this shows just how far they have come, if an activity is suggested which is a little more pricey, he will contribute more to it because he has a higher income. He said, and this is huge, friends help each other out. They have come a very long way, thank goodness. Thank goodness for the two adults involved, but especially thank goodness for the child that they are raising. Neil said that the timing of our catch-up was good because for him, life is going well now. His financial settlement is complete and his relationship with his ex-partner is on a very good track. He's completely debt-free and is having talks at work about exploring new avenues. He is wanting to create new connections and relationships, whether they be work or otherwise, and he feels like his life has real forward momentum. Now, I'm nearing the end, but before I wrap up, I've just got another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? KiwiSaver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/thehappisaver. That's pocketsmith.com/thehappisaver. I would really like to feel that by sharing Neil's experience, he might help other couples who are splitting up and are currently at war with each other stop fighting and reach an agreement. He encourages you to do it for your children and do it for your own sanity. And do it for the partner that you once loved so much that you combined your lives with them in the first place. What might Neil say to other men now that he has learned a hard lesson himself? Well, given his focus was on the dollars and cents for so long, at the exclusion of the people involved, he now thinks quite differently. He said, you have got to put the child first. You have to step back a minute and care about their well-being, whether they are in your home or with your ex-partner. He admitted that the ability to make it not all about you is a big factor. Your ex-partner is not trying to take advantage of you financially, but is trying to support your child and look after their financial situation. Putting unnecessary financial pressure on your spouse, especially if they are financially struggling already, will harm your children. Drawing out what will later be seen as a fair and reasonable settlement will take its toll on you, and there is peace to be had in resolving it, settling it, and moving on. Neil said that a lot of men forget that when they focus on the money, they sever their relationship with their children, and now that he is back dating, he is hearing the stories from women that the men scarper to absolve themselves from financial responsibility and co-parenting, and the kid's dad disappears from their life. Now, hearing this as a woman, I know that if I was dating a man who had abandoned his kids, I'd run a freaking mile, as it says a lot about a person's character. The fact that Neil stopped arguing the details means he gets to spend more time with his child, and each of them are happy with their custody arrangements. It makes him feel good to be an involved dad and a decent man. The person who has done the most changing is Neil, and to be honest, he really needed to. Having a child has made him learn empathy and to think about someone other than himself, he said. Going through all of this has made him want to be a better parent, and now he and his ex-partner are co-parenting so well. Gone is the animosity, and they calmly discuss their calendars and agree easily on decisions relevant to their child. Whereas previously each was resistant to any request and stuck to things to the letter, both adults have learned to compromise and communicate. And Neil now realises just how much his child picks up on things, and he's relieved to have stopped all the animosity so early in his child's life. The last few years have changed his view as to what money is for. He is still saving and investing for the future, but not putting everything off till he retires. In his 50s, it's time to spend a bit more and enjoy the time he has with his child. And this co-parenting couple no longer need to talk through lawyers, but have instead put their child at the centre of their world, meaning that they all get along. There is no doubt that Neil's habits of consistently saving and investing worked him into a good financial position, and now that he has a more rounded view of life and a sizable nest egg, his net worth will continue to grow. but going forward, he won't hold on to it so tightly, I think. Financial independence is so much better with friends, and I'm relieved and pleased that he's got a great relationship with his child now and the mother of his child. So finally, thank you so much, Neil, for really pulling back the curtain on your life over the last couple of years. You said yourself that it feels good to air things out. Now that it's all over and you can look ahead and life is looking a whole lot better. So there you have it. It was a different kind of episode this week, but via the emails I receive, the phone a friend calls I do, and the people I just speak with in general, a relationship ending can be one of the single worst events in a person's life because of the fights over custody and money. For women in particular, from my experience, it is particularly hard, especially when their ex can focus only on the money. So my final words are to encourage anyone going through a breakup to stop dragging out the pain and to reach an equitable agreement and just get on with your life. So that is all from me this week, and you know that if you want to get in touch, you can find me over at thehappysaver.com. Thanks to all the people who send me such lovely emails telling me you like this podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And please do share it with your friends. It's still the best way that people can learn about the podcast. And I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.